Good morning. I'm Mildred Richardson, and it's my extreme pleasure today to introduce to you Dr. Stephen Murgatroyd and the session that he's about to deliver, Resilience in an Age of Change and Opportunity. Stephen is a teacher, educator, and champion of change. He has worked in schools, colleges, and universities in the UK, Canada, and Europe, and researched school systems throughout the world. He's consulted for governments in Canada, US, UK, Scandinavia, Australia, New Zealand, and the Middle East on educational policy, development issues, and evaluating educational systems in 30 countries in the Commonwealth. You travel quite a bit. A prolific author, broadcaster, and keynote speaker, Stephen has recently presented in Dubai, Chile, New Zealand, Australia, Costa Rica, and Europe. He lives in Edmonton and is watching closely the educational progress of his 3 grandchildren in Edmonton school systems. Stephen Murgatroyd.
Hi. Well, it's a bit weird, isn't it? I rather thought this was a bit like Stephen Colbert last night, who was addressing a completely vacant studio, and it's exactly the same here. So essentially, I want to talk about the future in the context of you, about how to be resilient in the face of change. So that's what I want to do. And the reason I want to do it was actually set back way before COVID-19, before the oil price crash, and before the Edmonton Oilers looked like they could stand a chance of getting into the playoffs until yesterday. So let me walk through this presentation, and at the end, if you have questions, I'm happy to stand around and talk to a vacant room and answer them. So here we go. The talk is about change. And it's about how you, as a person, cope with change. Now, most of my work is about organizational change and transformation. But my first job, I basically can't keep a steady job, but the first job I ever had was as a therapist. I used to work with schizophrenics and depressives, and now I consult for the Premier of Ontario. Same work, better pay. But now I'm wanting to go back to where I started, because I think looking at us as people and looking at resilience is going to be helpful. There's an old Chinese proverb, which is actually a bit of a curse, is we live in interesting times. And don't we? Isn't it an interesting time? Just think about some of the things that are happening. The Oilers stood a chance of the playoffs, and then the NHL suspend the season. What kind of luck is this? I'd bought all the beer and the confetti and the toilet rolls and everything. I was all ready to go. COVID-19. I used to think this was another soccer team or some kind of hockey club, but no, it's a major illness. And it's going to impact millions of people around the world. It's already impacted me. I was due to go to Africa on Sunday, and now I'm going to be in Red Deer. Given a choice, I'd prefer Africa. We also have a lot of change going on right here in Alberta. Oil prices have gone through the floor, 32.42 this morning. The world is changing very quickly, right in front of us, and we're part of that change. And one of the things that happens to us is we have to process and cope with this change. Your organisation, Norquest, the University of Alberta, my old school, Athabasca University, where I was for 342 years, all these kind of places are going through major change. My colleagues in Ontario are switching to online learning like that, suddenly having to shut their institution and move online. So it's a rapidly changing world. But there are other changes going on as well that we need to think about. Where do we get our news and information from? If it wasn't for Facebook, I'd have no idea Michelle Obama was behind COVID-19 and the cancellation of the hockey season. It's all her fault. I would have no idea that Justin Trudeau wants to play for the Oilers. I'd have no idea about these truths. Where do we get our information from? It's a problem. It's a problem trying to get at facts. It's said that we're living in a post-truth society. Well, that's a problem for us because right now We need good, reliable, factual information. And this means that some of the ways in which we used to make decisions, is this a good time to buy a house? Is this a good time to invest in the stock exchange? Is this a good time to do various things? Should we travel? Should we not? How do we make these decisions? It's getting more difficult. And some of the people we used to be able to trust are no longer trustworthy. And so we have this problem about not only the speed at which things are changing around us, but how we understand these changes. And some of the rules that we used to use are no longer applicable. For example, when I went to school just after the Battle of Hastings, I was told that if you got a good education, you were guaranteed to get a job for life. No longer the case. So, the world is changing. And we can look at change in a number of different ways. We can be optimistic or pessimistic. We can be encouraged or discouraged. Let's look at the current situation, the reason we're all sitting watching a screen right now, and thinking about how well we're going to be over the next 14 days or 36 days. Are you thinking like this? This is a great time. We can do all sorts of things. I've got 14 days at home. If I'm quarantined, I've all these books to read, all this wine to drink, all these binge shows to watch. I can be really optimistic. Here are some of the ways you could be thinking. It's a fantastic time to strengthen my network, to write those letters I've always wanted to write. It's a great space to be in. That's one view of the current situation. And frankly, I've suddenly got 14 days I didn't know I was going to have because I was going to Africa and now I'm going to Red Deer. And so I'm planning to write something. I'm planning to watch some things. I've got some meals I want to cook. So I'm seeing this as a fantastic opportunity. I'm not miserable at all. But my friend next door, Peter, who is a miserable guy generally, he's absolutely miserable. His wife has some kind of symptoms. And so, oh, this is not going to end well. Things are bad. I can't even get out and shovel the driveway. I don't know what we're going to do. I'm going to have to cook. He's miserable. He's generally miserable. So we have pessimism and optimism. Which one are you? You're going to have to decide how you want to play the rest of this particular period of your life. Now, resilience, this is the definition I want to use, is when you decide to give up on giving in. It's when you decide to take control of your life. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of theory. Don't get too worried. I'm not going to use lots of big terms, but I want you to look at this little chart. Things progress along quite nicely, and then some kind of big event happens. It could be all sorts of things. You could have a car crash. There was one on the way in to this studio this morning. It could be that you get ill. It could be that your big plans for summer break are suddenly cancelled. It could be that you have to move to Ontario. How dreadful could that be? And so we have some kind of adverse event, and your life changes. How you deal with that is what this talk's all about. You need to reconcile this opportunity to rethink who you are and how you behave and navigate a different future. You could end up being in a better place than you were at the beginning of this story. Now, resilience has got some components to it. One is the ability to rebound. I quit my job one afternoon. I was driving up to my place of work, and on the way there I thought, I no longer want to do this job, and I quit. It would have been a good idea to have this conversation with my wife before I did this, but I didn't. And so to be a clever, nice, caring husband, on the way home, I brought an espresso machine thinking this would help. It doesn't. So my advice is talk to the boss. But resilience is about rebounding. It's about being able to take an adverse event and turn it into something positive for you. My quitting the job turned out to be the best thing I ever did for me. Resilience is also about becoming more robust to risk. The more resilient experiences you have, the more opportunities you have to practice being optimistic because things have changed, then the more likely you are to take bigger risks. Resilience is also about becoming more adaptive. Do you have a range of ways of coping, or do you only have one? Is your way of coping always the same, no matter what the challenge or problem is? And finally, how do you cope with really big surprises? Really big sudden shocks? Do you use the same skill there, or do you do something different? This is the kind of last big bit of theory. There's a couple of other pieces, but this is the big piece. We have kinds of lots of risks in our life. We take risks every day. You take a risk driving on the roads here in Edmonton, down the Henday, on the white mud. It's a risk. But we see this risk as low. We're used to it. We do this all the time. So for us, this is a low risk. A high risk might be something you've never done before, but you've actually prepared for it. You've thought about it. I went skydiving. Don't recommend it, but I prepared mentally for it. And I didn't find this too difficult. It was manageable for me. There are some high-level risks that happen frequently for me and for other people. But again, we know how to handle those. It's the low risks with high levels of risk that happen infrequently that are difficult for us to cope with. This is one of those moments when basically Canada is shutting itself down. My friend and colleague in Italy, my sister in Spain, her country is shutting down right now. My colleague who I'm working with at the moment in Norway is locked in. It's shut down. So these are different, unusual situations, infrequent, but really demand us to think about who we are and how we cope. Now, the first choices we make when we think about coping is who is it that we can rely on? Who do we work with? Who do we trust? Who do we trust within the family? I have an uncle I wouldn't trust with a banana. Who do we trust? So, here are some of the questions we ask. Am I really positively connected and bonded with this person? Is this person always being authentic with me? Or are they just saying things that they think I want to hear? Do they and I have effective life skills? And are there clear boundaries in this relationship? Do we all know where we stand? And the second thing is about you and the things that you do, the work that you do. Do I get from my workplace, from my colleagues, those of you watching together right now, empathy, warmth, and genuineness in my interactions at work? One of the things we know about a workplace like Norquest, or a college, or any university, or any workplace, is if you have a best friend at work, you are healthier, both mentally and physically, than if you don't. And I'll come back to that later when we talk about students. Do you feel that your workplace is caring and supportive of you? And if it does, are you making the most of the opportunities to leverage those cares and supports? Do you set high standards for your own work and expect your colleagues and peers at work to do the same? Are you in a high-performing organization? I'm really pleased to be at Norquest today. One of the things that's impressive about this institution is how it's really blossomed in the last 15 to 20 years. It's really transformed itself into a critically important piece of our learning infrastructure. And so this is a place that's going places. This is a place that has things to do. I know lots of students that are here, and they are very proud of their experience of this institution. You're doing good work. But do you feel you could do more? Do you feel encouraged to do more? If you do, you're in the right place. And do you feel that the organization and your needs are all focused and aligned in the same way? The more your needs for work and the more expectations you have at work are aligned with where the institution is, the healthier you will be. Now, the last piece in this theory section is you don't have to be perfect to be resilient, you just have to be persistent. And I think that one of the things that I've learned in my 300 years of being an employee, I started work in 1972, and I'm still working. I'm coming up to 70 this year. It's also my 50th wedding anniversary. I'm married to a saint. She must be a blessed person to live with me. But I think that the reality is persistence pays. Don't be put off by being refused something or being rejected. Keep at it. I've written 40 books, for example, but the first one I wrote was rejected 27 times before it was published. And if I'd have gone into misery after the first 2 or 3 rejections, I may have never written another word. Persistence pays. So, I want to really help you think about what resilience looks like in practice. So that was the theory bit. We're moving on to practice. What can you do to be a resilient person? So here are some things that occur to me. There's just 10 things on this list. You can't solve a problem that you helped to create by using the same thinking patterns and the same methods that got you into it. You have to break out and think differently. Find a new angle, find a new approach, a new way of thinking about how you're going to look at a problem. So, for example, when I moved from Canada back to the UK for a 5-year window, I left the university world and went into the private sector to earn some real money, and I went to Europe. We actually took our kids who were, one of them was at McEwan at the time, the other was just about to start at the U of A, and we took them to dinner and said, we're going to Europe. They said, oh, great. And I said to them, but you're not coming, because I'd worked out if we didn't leave them, they'd never leave us. So we left and they stayed here. Great decision. Good for them, good for us. But there were all sorts of issues about managing a relationship with our 2 sons at a distance. And if I'd applied the same ways that we did to bringing them up when we were all together, that relationship may have broken down. We started thinking differently about how to be parents to 2 young 18, 19-year-olds living in a different country on a different continent. A little side story. We brought them both back to Europe for Christmas. My youngest son arrived with a backpack, and my eldest son brought his laundry over the ocean. See, he was still thinking in an old way about how life used to be. We explained to him as he took his dirty laundry back that things had changed. So you can't solve a problem that you've got yourself into with the same methods that you got that problem in the first place. Second thing is, we tend to get emotional when things go wrong. And our emotions drive what we do. Don't do that. Stop. Make lists. Move into a different space. Here are some things I could do. This is what might happen. Here are the opportunities. Here are the threats. Let's get rational about the problem that you face. If you let emotions run you, you will not become resilient. You'll become emotional. There's a really critical thing to do. Things will keep going wrong when things change. It may be this COVID-19 situation we're all in will get worse before it gets better. We have to be persistent. We have to stay the course. Even if you get knocked down, you'll have to get back up and do it again and again until you get something right. So persistence, stay the course, stay tough is part of the message. I'm 70 and people keep saying to me, are you going to retire? Well, no, I have no understanding what retirement means. It's an alien concept to me. Why? Because I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm networking, I'm building connections. I'm connecting to people all over the world, and I'm learning every day from these networks and connections. I had a long conversation with my colleague in South Africa, who's the president of the largest university in Africa with 400,000 students. We spoke for an hour and a half this morning, and we both ended the conversation by sharing with each other that we'd both learned a lot from the conversation. I've known him for 20 years. We still learn from each other each time we talk. And growth and learning is what keeps us young and alive. It also builds resilience. One of the things I'm good at, and it's one of the things I did as a therapist and I've done all my life, is anticipate and prepare. So my little notebook, the one I have here, is full of to-do lists. It's full of lists of significant things that I have to achieve, not just today or tomorrow, but in the next 2 years. I'm ahead of myself. I'm working on one book now. I have another book planned for next year. I have meetings planned for 2023. I'm really futures focused in my own personal life, not just in terms of the work that I do. So anticipate, plan, think ahead. And I know sometimes these get disrupted. That's fine. But if you know the direction your life is going, you can live a fuller life. I never throw away a business card. In fact, the very reason I live in Canada comes from a chance encounter I had with somebody who was working at the University of Saskatchewan. And he said to me, if you ever get yourself to Canada, come and see me. I knocked on his door 10 weeks later. He was shocked. He'd said this to virtually everybody he'd met for 20 years, and I was the first person that actually took him seriously. But build relationships, connect, network with people. That chance encounter led to a permanent residence for me in Canada. It led to my grandkids being here. It led to my youngest grandkid now being qualified to be an oiler at some point in the future. He's on the ice as we speak. One of the great things to do is to create your own sense of self and your own meaning and purpose for your life. The best and most important book I ever read in my life is called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor was a prisoner at Auschwitz, and he asked himself the question, who's going to survive this? He was a psychologist. Who's going to survive this? And his answer was very simple. The people that will survive this are those people who think they have important things yet to do. They have meaning and purpose in their life. One of them was a mathematician. And he said to Victor, while they were together in this dreadful situation, I cannot die because I'm pretty close to solving one of the great 10 problems in mathematics. He survived. He did solve that problem in mathematics and won the Field Medal, which is the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for mathematics. But he did so because he had meaning and purpose from the age of 15 in his life. Maths was his meaning and purpose. Never been mine, but was his. And so what's your meaning? What's your purpose of being here? I think the more you explore and understand that, the more resilient you are. Now, I already said this, but it's worth saying again. In life, things go wrong. Get used to it. It's not a shock, it's no surprise that not everything goes well. Pick yourself up, get on with it. Stop being miserable, move, do things. Be positive, get on, make the next step. I must have done this 30 times. My boss called me in and said, we've decided to sell the company that you're chief executive of. So I was running 3 companies in Europe. I'd moved myself and my wife back to Europe to run these 3 companies. And 5 years later, my parent company had decided to get out of all the businesses that we were in. I had no idea that this was going to happen. Now, I could have been miserable. I could have been shocked. I could have been deeply upset. My reaction was, great. What a chance to start again. Let's pick ourselves up and get moving. We came back to Canada, and I've not looked back since. You're going to have lots of moments in your life when you think there's a big prize coming. Don't wait. Celebrate all the time. I did a big piece of work for IBM Global at one point, working all over the world for IBM on their leadership development program. And there was one guy in Singapore who had this wonderful phrase: always carry a jam and celebrate, because you could be toast tomorrow. And I thought, this is not a good idea, but actually he's right. Celebrate small things all the time. It doesn't have to be just the big things. Do you think I've been waiting for 50 years to celebrate my wedding anniversary? Just once? No. We celebrate, my wife and I, all the time. Small things, all the time. By the way, I'm hoping my kids are going to buy as a celebration for our 50th, because they've got away with murder so far, so they should be paying for our celebration. One of the secrets of becoming resilient yourself is to be compassionate to other people who need you. Why are we all here? We're here to help each other. Like at this particular time, loneliness could be a bigger killer than COVID-19. And so reaching out to people, reaching out to neighbors who you know are on their own. We have one across the street. One of us pops in every single day right now to make sure she's fine, she's okay, she doesn't need anything we can help her with. We're there for her. Showing that compassion, understanding people other than yourself, reaching beyond yourself, helps us grow inside. And so that's my 10 suggestions for you. I want to show a small little video. It's not very long, it's from a TED Talk, but this is about the work that Norquest does. Every one of you, doesn't matter what role you're in the institution, whether you're a support staff member, you're sitting in an office, or whether you're a teacher, doesn't matter, you have an impact on the students that come here. This is a little story, and it's a powerful story from somebody who was not a teacher, who was a student union officer at the time. Just watch this for a moment. We're not going to get sound, are we? No. So, no, there's no sound coming from this, so I'll tell you the story. There's a student about to register for their course at a university in the Maritimes, and her parents were with her. And she said to her mum and dad, looking around, she's from a very small community, looking around, she said, I don't think this is for me. I don't think I can cope with being in a large place like this. And her parents said, we're with you. If you don't want to register, we'll go home and talk about what we do next. Don't worry about it. Don't feel bad. At that exact moment, the young man on this video, and I'll share the slide deck so you can look at it later, came out and said, do you want a lollipop? And she took the lollipop, and he turned to the crowd and said, there you are, first day at university accepting sweets from a stranger. What kind of deal is this? And everybody laughed, including the young lady. And he gave her another lollipop. He said, now, you give that to the man you're stood next to this young man here, and make him feel happy at being here. Now, this is a shy lady, a girl who wasn't sure she wanted to register, a girl who was not at all sure she'd like large crowds, very shy. She gave this young man a lollipop. Said, look at that. Not only does she take strangers a lollipop and a sweet from a stranger, she's trying to get young men to get her lollipop as well. Let's speed forward. She registered, was successful, and is now married to the man she gave the lollipop to. And the man from the Students' Union who gave her this lollipop in the first place has no recollection of the fact that he transformed this young lady's life in all sorts of ways. She's now a social worker. She didn't know she liked social work. She's now successful as a manager of a social work team. She didn't think she could manage. But it's all because somebody just cared for her at a very critical moment of truth. That happens all the time. We don't know the quiet impact a small gesture of kindness can have on another person. So, not only do you be resilient for yourself, by being yourself, you can help other people be resilient. Now, I mentioned earlier that having a best friend at work makes a huge difference to mental health. It also makes a difference to the students' well-being as well. In fact, if I was to ask just one question of every student here that would predict how well they were going to do at college, it would be, do you have a best friend at college? And if the answer is yes, they're more likely to be successful, they're more likely to complete, they're more likely to pursue more education than if they say no. So creating opportunities for networking, for social gatherings, to connect people together is very important. Here are some of the reasons why having a best friend makes a difference. Now, I just wanted to spend this couple of minutes on your work as a member of a college community to make the point that not only is this talk about your resilience, it's about helping others become resilient. Now, if you remember nothing else from this talk, other than a poor sense of humor and a video that didn't work, think about these things. First, create your own meaning and purpose. Nobody else is coming. This is your life. Choose what it is to be for you, what it means for you. Second, build that friendship at work that matters. My daughter-in-law works across the street at McEwen. She has a best friend at work, and there must be at least 10 occasions in the last 5 years where that friendship has completely made the difference to my daughter-in-law's life and this friend's life. Third, show compassion to others as well as yourself. Care for yourself, look after yourself. And finally, choose to be optimistic. Now, if that doesn't work, wine's a good solution. Here are some bottles I have at work. A rough day, breakdown, murder on my mind. I don't drink these, they're all full. Why? Because I'm an optimist. If I can be helpful, here's how to find me. There's a book I've written with my colleague Sarah Jane Harris, another clinical psychologist, about resilience. And so if you'd like a copy, it's available on Lulu and on Amazon.com and .ca. Thank you very much. Now, if you have questions, let us have them, and I'm happy to stand and respond to some of those questions.
I'm just going to share some of the comments that were coming in on the chat. So timely. Love this relevant and timely. So it seems like it's really hit the mark for the people watching today. And there was a question about the slides, about posting them, and you've already answered that.
Sure. The slides are freely available. I'll also post them on slideshare.com.
Okay.
Sorry, .net. Slideshare.net, LinkedIn's slide sharing system. They'll be up later on today.
I'm just waiting for questions. Again, will we have access to the deck, slide deck? Yes, it's, I believe, going to share it, and it's going to be posted on the Cube, which is our internal site. Okay, one question's come in. What would you suggest for self-care at this time in our city?
Good question. Thank you very much for asking it. I'd be looking to have a plan for how you're going to enjoy the challenges of this moment. You could be miserable, but I'm optimistic. So, as I said, I may be confined to barracks for 14 days. I don't know. But if I am, I have a reading plan, a writing plan. I have a menu plan. There are meals I want to cook. I cook as a hobby. And so I'm very positive about this time. I mean, suddenly being given the gift of time is a wonderful thing. And I know it's challenging circumstances. That's the first thing. The second thing is show compassion to other people. So find somebody in your neighborhood that you're concerned about and make sure they're okay. And finally, make sure you're healthy. Eat well, get some exercise even if you can't leave the house, drink lots of water and wash your hands. So I think it's basically the simple stuff, but this is a great opportunity to reflect on meaning and purpose. So if you haven't read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, do so now. It's actually a downloadable book from the Edmonton Public Library.
And that did come up in our chat in terms of somebody recommended that book. So awesome. Another question that came in is how can we motivate others to be more resilient?
How can we remotivate
How can we
others
motivate others?
to be more resilient? Well, the best thing is to be a role model. So show what resilience looks like in practice in your own daily life. But secondly, spend time and talk to them about whether their current ways of thinking are getting in the way of being really productive and useful and living a full life. So I think one of the things we do is use old ways of thinking to start thinking about new things. And I think we need to think differently about how we work and how we operate. So it's a real good chance to engage in reflective conversation that says, how are you thinking? Go past the surface and get into modes of thinking, ways of talking. So I think that would be helpful. There are lots of practical suggestions in the book that I wrote with Sarah Jane Harris too.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking at the other questions. There was a question in terms of the students at the college, in reference to your having a best friend. How can we better connect students who may not fall into the typical college model, online evening students, and lower level link learning students?
So I've spent my life at the Open University in the UK, Athabasca University here, the Smart University of Dubai, the Open Polytechnic of New Zealand, all distance teaching institutions. And I'm teaching right now on our MBA program, which I helped to create in 1993-94. And one of the things I do is build connections and relationships online. I'm not talking about computer dating, I'm talking about in the learning environment. And so, for example, this morning, one of my students is infected with COVID-19, and as is another one in a completely different part of the country. And I spent 15 minutes this morning connecting the two together and helping them have a conversation about coping. Both of them are very shy, which is why they like the online environment. And I've done this all my life. I mean, I think that online is just as powerful as face-to-face for all sorts of relationship building. And so we need to find ways of not just doing instruction online, but creating community online, creating conversations online, creating inspiring conversations online. So this is about the design of learning in an online space. The second part of that question was, what about those students who are in college but are not naturally gregarious, not naturally connected, or come from a background, perhaps from a different part of the world, where making connections with new people is frowned on? I just think the kind of small group gatherings that Norquest does, the bringing together of people from different nationalities, putting people together from the same nationality, bringing people together in small groups on project work, are all ways of building connections. So I think the design of learning and the design of activity needs to reflect a commitment to connection, needs to be a constructivist connection that we need to make. So I think we need to think about learning not so much as passing on things, but connecting people to each other and to knowledge. So I'm a constructivist kind of designer, and I think that's the model of learning that we should be pursuing.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking to see if there's any other questions. I think I'm not seeing any more questions right now.
Okay. Well, I think the best thing to do is to say thank you. And I hope that your learning day is productive and that you're finding lots of ideas. If you look up my name online, Murgatroyd, it's just remember heavens to and you'll get the end of the name. You'll find the book at amazon.ca if you want to have a look at that. But I have lots of materials online and a blog space as well. Thanks very much for the opportunity to share. And I hope your period of isolation is not that long. Have fun.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. We've had such positive response on the chat. It's resonated, and thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.